Now, I'd like to start this episode of the Richard and Judy Book Club download by stating that I have nothing in common with the title character.
The Husband's Secret by Liane Moriarty.
Well, that's good to know, Richard. So just to be clear, you have no secrets from me?
None, my petal, not a one.
So can you tell me what you've bought me for Christmas?
I can't do that. No. It's not a secret, but it is a surprise, as was the letter at the centre of Liane Moriarty's fabulous book.
Around the World with the Richard and Judy Book Club, exclusive to WHSmith.
So this scene is when Cecilia Fitzpatrick has called her husband. He's away overseas on business, to tell him that she's found this peculiar letter. I found this letter, said Cecilia now. She ran her fingertips over his handwriting on the front of the envelope. As soon as she heard his voice, she knew she was going to ask him about it that very second. They'd been married for 15 years. There had never been secrets. What letter? A letter from you, said Cecilia. She was trying to sound light, jokey, so that this whole situation would stay in the right perspective, so that whatever was in the letter would mean nothing, would change nothing. To me, to be opened in the event of your death. It was impossible to use the words event of your death to your husband without your voice coming out odd. There was silence. For a moment she thought they'd been cut off, except that she could hear a gentle hum of chatter and clatter in the background. It sounded like he was calling from a restaurant. Her stomach contracted. John Paul? 2 years ago, about deathbed confessions. So there were all sorts of fascinating little stories. So, for example, there was the story of the man who confessed on his deathbed to faking a photo of the Loch Ness Monster. And there was also a songwriter who was dying of cancer, and she admitted that she'd plagiarised a lullaby melody. And the story that really got me thinking was a man who, he suffered a stroke, and while he was in his hospital bed, he confessed he'd killed his neighbour 30 years earlier. The only problem was that he didn't end up dying. He recovered. So as soon as he got better, he went straight from hospital to jail. So that got me thinking about this idea, this overwhelming desire these people must have had to confess or simply to reveal their secret. So that's when I came up with the idea, who writes a letter to be opened in the event of his death, which his wife finds. So it's basically a deathbed confession, except he's not dead. If I found a letter from my husband to be opened in the event of...
Now, this is the kind of book that opens with the question that every wife, I think, cannot fail to imagine what she would do if it happened to her.
Well, in other words, you find a letter from your spouse, by accident, hidden, and on the front of the envelope are the words, "Not to be opened until after my death."
And for her, for Cecilia Fitzpatrick,
Absolutely.
his wife,
Not
to be opened in the event of my death.
I mean, what would you... And this person is still very much alive. What would you do? Now, I have to say... All right, let's deal with this here. I would... If I found a letter like that from you, right, and you'd gone down the shops, and I found this... Would I open it? Of course I would.
And indeed, so would I.
Yeah, exactly.
And I think so would everyone, unless they were terminally incurious or a bit peculiar, or very frightened.
Or maybe had a moral code, felt that if that was the wish of the person who'd written the letter...
I don't think any husband or wife has that kind of moral code, Richard. We all want to know what the other one's thinking.
Well, anyway, it's a letter with disastrous consequences, because the secret is no simple secret at all. I mean, it takes us back into an extraordinarily complex backstory.
Cecilia Fitzpatrick and her husband, John Paul, have a tremendously happy, contented, successful suburban life. Happy family, happy children, everything's great. Cecilia couldn't be more pleased with the way everything's going. And then she discovers this letter. And yes, she opens it. And what she discovers inside it completely rocks her to pieces. She thinks...
Everything she thought she knew, she doesn't.
The letter was written shortly after the birth of their first child, and dated shortly after the birth of their first child. So she obviously, when she opens it first, she thinks, oh, he's going to write something really nice about becoming a father for the first time and me having his first baby, but it's nothing like that. And it's absolutely shattering for her. And of course, the whole thing, to me, is the whole Pandora's box allegory. What happens if you're perfectly happy, everything's great, you come across a box, curiosity compels you to open it, and all the evils of the world fly out?
Do you know what it reminded me of? It reminded me of the very last chapter of Graham Greene's Brighton Rock, where Pinky, you know, the gangster who's now dead, he's left a record. He's recorded a record in one of those booths on Brighton Pier that they had
I remember, yeah.
to his girlfriend, and he's gone in there telling her, this is before he dies, telling her that he's going to record some kind of love message. And she finds this record after he's killed, and it's not a love message at all, at all. He's looking through the glass at her and telling her how much he hates her. And that's how the book ends. She does. I mean, it's almost the beginning.
That's Brighton Rock. That's
Brighton
not
Rock.
this book.
No. That's Brighton Rock. But that's almost the beginning of a new story. What would she have done then? I can't remember the girlfriend's name. But it is that extraordinary moment when a secret is uncovered, and everything you thought you knew, you didn't. You've been wrong.
It's a fascinating book.
It's great.
And wives everywhere will find it compulsive reading, I can tell you.
I'm ripping up my letters as soon as I get home. Telling you, I've hidden it well, but even so.
If he was still very much alive, I would absolutely open the letter. I'm afraid that my desire to know would override any ethical considerations, and I'd just be desperate to know what he'd written. My husband always says that he knows that I would open the letter, so that's why he'd never write such a thing in the first place. And I probably would tell my husband straight away that I had opened and read the letter. I expect I'd finish the last sentence and I'd be on the phone to him to say, "I've read this letter," which hopefully wouldn't reveal as startling a secret as is revealed in The Husband's Secret. Yes, I definitely think the myth of Pandora. I think there are definitely occasions when it's okay to keep a secret. I think if you're going to hurt somebody, I don't think you have a moral imperative to keep a secret. I always say when people ask this question, because I have been asked before, that, for example, I think there are some cases, in the case of infidelity, where it's okay to keep that secret, but then I always feel like I'm keeping that secret myself, which is not the case. But I do believe, of course, sometimes it's okay to keep a secret. The key qualities of a good storyteller are the ability to observe those tiny little aspects of life that when they're revealed, that you think, of course, you've noticed them so many times before, but you would never think to put them in a story yourself. So, for example, I always think of Anne Tyler's my favourite author. But it's because she's picking out these tiny little things. So I think that's one of the key qualities that makes a good storyteller. Also, of course, there are all the obvious things like pace, keeping the pace right, and a good plot and good characters.
The Richard and Judy Book Club, exclusive to WHSmith.
Next time, it's no fairy tale on the Richard and Judy Book Club.
So many people can understand what happens. They understand that because they know how little villages work, when everybody knows each other. And it is so difficult to keep secrets, and it is so difficult to make people forget something.
Well, it's not just the book that makes an interesting story. Wait till you hear what novel way author Nele Neuhaus, yes, she's German, came up with to get her stories out to her readers.
That's still to come on the Richard and Judy Book Club, exclusive to WHSmith.